So next up we have, you want to do the introduction of board? Okay. So next up we have Blayne Arthur, the Oklahoma Ag Commissioner. Commissioner Arthur is a farmer and rancher and the first woman to hold the position of Ag Commissioner. She acutely understands the needs of her constituents, thanks to a childhood spent on a farm in Chickasha and now operating a farm and business with her husband Jared, providing show cattle for students in 4-H and FFA. Arthur's humble, passionate spirit, combined with big picture vision and leadership marked by character and conviction, serve those she guides well, both in her profession and as a mom. So we'll welcome her up to the podium. Morning. We could just put that on.
Okay, you bet. You betcha. Okay. Is that okay?
That'll work.
Good, you guys can hear? Okay. Well, good morning. Certainly thank you, Andy, for the invitation. Lots of familiar faces in the room and some of you that I don't know, and I apologize I can't hang out with you guys all day, but certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here. Always good to see my friends from the legislature, Representative Humphrey, who I know is a familiar face to everyone, and Senator Hamilton. It's very nice for us to have folks at the state capitol who know about agriculture, because even in a very rural state like Oklahoma, not all of those folks that spend time at the capitol know about ag and how important that is to folks. So always good to have legislators who really understand about ag. Also have one of my Board of Ag members here with us, Joe Ferris, and his wife, Sue Ellen. Joe is probably, yes, Joe deserves a round of applause, absolutely. Joe, I think, I'd have to check, but I think is our longest serving Board of Ag member, and we're very excited to have someone who absolutely understands certainly the cattle industry, but also rural Oklahoma and a lot of the things that have already been mentioned here this morning. And, you know, a lot of times I speak places, I typically do not like to have to come up and speak after the pastor. So that's maybe not my favorite spot to come in after he did such an excellent job. Certainly just want to touch on a couple of things. First of all, in 2020 was mentioned. No question that was a really, really challenging time for everyone for a variety of reasons. I think from an ag perspective, a really, really good thing about 2020 is all the folks that were shopping in the grocery store when we did have empty shelves suddenly started saying, where is this food coming from? And why can't I buy products from my friends down the road? You know, why can't I find beef or pork or chicken from, I want to support my neighbors, I want to support local, and suddenly people started asking questions about what does this food supply chain look like, what is happening with it, and what can we do? Because I would say as a very general rule here in Oklahoma, if Oklahoma consumers have the option, they want to buy a local product. That is what they choose to do. I think we've seen some real good things happen. In 2020, we had some dollars. We had $10 million that went out as grants from the Department of Ag to local processors. When we talked about funding that, we had made that request of those dollars, and I told the governor how important that was. We wanted to build the small and medium-sized processors, but then I talked to my staff and I said, okay, I've made this request for these dollars. What if we don't have anybody apply for them? Because I thought, I don't know what's going to happen. Well, we had $10 million to allocate. We had applications of over $110 million, which just showed the interest that there is in building the processing capacity in the state of Oklahoma. So we were able, 41 facilities, that $10 million went to 41 facilities across the state of Oklahoma. I will tell you, there were some naysayers that said, Blayne, you're going to push this money out the door, and then, you know, we're going to have this blip because of COVID, and then these places are going to go away. That has not been the case. We continue to have people building new facilities, expanding their facilities. Now, also, you all know the cattle business, so I'm not going to talk to you. I never want to talk to the room of experts about what they already know about. We know we still need more capacity, right? There's no question that we need more capacity. But I like to talk about how important those small and medium-sized processors are, because I think about a community like where my kids go to school. We live east of Stillwater, so they go to school in Ripley, which right now is just a school and a gas station. And we love it, right? Everybody comes in from out in the country to go to school there. But I think sometimes we're chasing, when we look at commerce or economic development, we're chasing 1,000 jobs, you know, these big. Well, in a small community, 5 jobs or 10 jobs makes a huge difference. And then you've got a small business there, and then you remember that then those families get to stay in that community, and then those kids get to stay in that school. And I personally think there's nothing better than having the opportunity to raise your family in a rural area, or at least in a school that kind of has that approach to educating your kids. So I think when we think about value added on the ag side and these processing facilities, exciting for us to see that they've continued to grow, that they're adding freezer capacity, and two, I think now more than ever, we're seeing direct to consumer sales of beef. And that's a big, big deal. And two, I think helping with that conversation with consumers, that you need to tell people that that matters to you. I always say, I do tell this story sometimes. As mentioned, my husband's a cattle producer. Now, I know we got lots of commercial guys in the room, so I preface, we're the show cattle deal, so I know it's a little different than the commercial side of things, but we always have beef in the freezer. And I like to tell a story about my daughter. One of the first times she went to spend the night with a friend, and then she came back home and she said, "Mom, did you know that you can buy a hamburger at the grocery store?" I said, "Well, actually, yes, I did know that, but she's just grown up that, you know, you go to the garage and you get it out of the deep freeze." So having some opportunity to make that available to everyone, I think, is really, really important. What we want to continue to do, or what I would like to continue to do, is find a way for Oklahoma ag producers to be successful, to stay in business, to stay on that family farm if they choose to. And a lot of that is finding ways to get more of those dollars back to the producer. And you all understand all the pieces of that, but value added, I think, is a big piece. Making sure that we are not overly burdensome with regulations. Even though I run a regulatory agency, and I think the pastor mentioned the government is not the answer. And even though I work for the government, I agree the government is not the answer to our problems. Governor Stitt has challenged us that for any new rule that is created at an agency, you have to get rid of 2 rules. And that very quickly keeps agencies from creating some additional regulation just because they think it's a good idea. I think we have a wonderful team at the Department of Ag, but I also have to remind folks that we have the luxury of sitting in an office every day, right? We're not out in the weather. We're sitting in the office, and somebody's, doing paperwork or sending emails, and it's always a really good balance for me. I drive home down a dirt road every day. And I'm married to a guy who doesn't really like regulations and certainly doesn't like the government. So it's this nice reminder of that's real life, right? That's somebody trying to make a living who'd rather spend his time in the barn or the feed truck or out in the pasture. Like, that's what he is focused on every day. He's not focused on he's not focused on some bill at the legislature. He's trying to do his job every day. And I think as a regulatory agency, we've got to remember that. We can't, provide barriers to folks who are trying to make a living. Now, again, there's things that we need to do, and we all understand that. Reasonable things that we need to do for food safety and all those, animal health, all those things, which is good. But I think we've got to remember we can't let that get away from us. And I think very quickly when folks forget what it's like on the farm and ranch, and get out of touch with that. And you have folks that maybe are just in government offices all day, you lose some of that. So I do think we're in a really good place in Oklahoma. I think we've got legislators who are attuned to agriculture and to the cattle industry. And I think we've got people who are passionate about what matters to them. I was trying to think back, Andy, the first time we were at a meeting together, I think was in 2008. And we just got to visit. And I will tell you the one thing that I will always remember about Andy Hutchison is if she's one thing, she is passionate. And, you know, such a testament to her. She is very, very passionate about what she cares about. I talked to groups, I borrowed this from somebody else, but I've kind of been using it this year, about all issues, because this is a Saturday, right? And y'all got a million other things to do. Joe Ferris drove from Tologa. Our legislators are a long way from home to be here in Oklahoma City on a day. And what I've been telling folks is you can pretend to care, but you cannot pretend to show up. And I think that's so important when we talk about ag in Oklahoma, when we talk about rural issues. People have got to show up. I'm born and raised here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma City and Tulsa look a lot different than when I was a kiddo. Some people would say that was good. Some people would say that's bad for a variety of reasons. But I want Oklahoma to be the Oklahoma that I was raised in. And so I think there's lots, and again, you're going to have lots of different opinions on that. That's just my opinion on that. But I think having good conversations, remembering, I always tell people, we don't live here because of the weather. We live here because of the people. And so people that show up and are passionate about what they care about, passionate about the ag industry, I think we just need to keep good conversations going. Certainly I know lots of you in this room know how to track me down. But certainly don't hesitate to reach out to us at the Department of Ag, to reach out to me, any of our staff. Lots of good ideas. I didn't want to forget to mention one thing that the legislature did that I think y'all do lots of good things, but I think we've seen a lot of momentum from, and that was the Oklahoma Certified Beef Program. You all passed that a couple of years ago, and that has grown and got momentum. So when you have ideas like that, I encourage you to talk to your legislators. And they'll kick those things around and they get good things started. So good conversations, I think, are always important. If we can help, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you just want to fuss at me, people fuss at me a lot too, so that's okay. You can always call and fuss at me. But I think it's important to hear perspectives from every side and ultimately how we can work together to just make the ag industry strive in the state of Oklahoma. Final thing that I'll end on is, and this has kind of been touched on a little bit, is I 100% believe that food security is national security. And we have to remember that. So with that, I do have to excuse myself, but Andy, always very much appreciate the invitation. Great to see everyone here this morning. If I can help, just let me know. But oh, yes, sir. You bet. Yes, absolutely.
As Commissioner of Agriculture, what are your thoughts on the USDA recently wanting to ban herd share? Thomas Massey, Representative Massey, got that shut down this week for a year. What are your thoughts on the USDA's reasoning behind the banning of herd share?
Well, I'll be kind of broad and say that probably right now USDA has a lot different take on things than Oklahoma or than we would. I think there's probably a variety of reasons for that. I think there's some good things that they've pivoted to try to help smaller producers and reach out to rural parts of the United States. I can't speak specifically to why they did or did not make that decision. But I think it's incredibly important that USDA and those regulators and those decision makers listen to actual producers. And so we've got folks here, certainly at the state level, that can have those conversations, but having folks in Washington, D.C., that really, really understand what's happening on the ground and can have conversations and engage with those agencies. Because one thing that I think we see a little bit of is agencies, EPA, they're kind of going out on their own path, and they're not being responsive to Congress. You know, they can't just, well, I say they can't, but they are sometimes creating some rules and regs on their own, and that's not really how we're designed. So I think agencies at the federal level have got to be responsive, and I think there's a lot of work to be done to address that. But that is probably one thing that concerns me a lot, is what we see coming from in FDA, EPA. I mean, you talk about now just on things like veterinary feed directive and what medicine you can get and can't get, like that. There's some hurdles there, I think, which can be challenging, but that's why people have to communicate with whoever your elected official is and kind of share why that's important to you and your family and what you do on your place. But we've got to just keep the conversation going, because I think they get stuck there in D.C. sometimes and forget what it looks like at home. So.
With that said, who has, you know, if they in a year decide to implement this herd share ban, who has authority? Is it the USDA, or is it the state of Oklahoma, or any other state? Where is that relationship?
Well, that's where we get into a rub sometimes, because I would say we certainly lean more on states' rights, taking authority, but simultaneously, and the legislators know this, there's some things that are funded for us at the state level that are USDA programs. I will say, from more of kind of a regional perspective, we usually have a pretty good dialogue with within Region 6, which is a region that we sit in. It's kind of when we jump to D.C. that there's a little bit of gap sometimes. So and you don't, I mean, I feel like we get into litigation on so many issues, and that's expensive and time consuming. But I will say that if we as a state feel like that we justifiably can assert authority and have authority, that would be our approach, because we think that's important to follow that path if we can.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Thank you all very much, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
You bet. That's a fancy little mic. I
Yes.
like that.
So, what